For the past 300 years, the Islip Town clerk has been recording and preserving the story of the people of Islip Town and of its hamlets and villages. Along with the duty of the town clerk to record and preserve records, there is a requirement to interpret these records and documents and make them available to the public. That duty falls to the Islip Town historian. This series of short PowerPoint videos will examine documents, records, and artifacts in the Islip Town Historic Collection and discuss their impact on the history of this town and its people. The very beginnings of Islip Town government occurred at a time when the voters met once a year to determine the direction of the town. It was a time in history that had followed constant turmoil in governance of the royal colony of New York, and frequent changes in the head of state in England. The first document in the series is a look at the minutes of the first meeting of what was then the precinct of Islip. This document is found on page 9 of Volume 1 of the Town Meeting Record Books. This is the permanent record of the meeting which established the first government of the future town of Islip. At first glance, it appears to be routine record of the election results of a typical meeting, nothing more. A closer look at the context of the times reveals details are that hidden in the document. A casual researcher might overlook the impact of the context, but a closer look at this entry in the town records reveals an amazing story. This transcription to gives the words of the document but does not tell the complete story. You might want to pause this for a moment and read the transcript before we go on and examine this page in detail. The location of this first meeting was not noted in the minutes, but other references tell us that the first meeting was held at the home of John Douglas, called the Log House, in what is now Islip Hamlet. The home also doubled as the community store. It is believed that the meetings were held here up until 1825. Second owner, Luther Looper, made this home a social gathering place. Today, a highway historical marker has been placed on the north side of Montauk Highway, just east of Islip Avenue, and across from St. Mark's Lane to mark the probable location of that building. In 1720, there was no Montauk Highway, as that road it was not ordered laid out until the 1730s. So the road here would have been no more than a rough footpath. Getting to the meeting would have required a great deal of effort on the part of those who attended. Sources tell us that there were 28 freeholders eligible to vote, and at that time there was no secret ballot. Even a relatively routine document may yield a great deal of information about the writers and the times when it was written. Just what made this document and the meeting it recorded possible. It was a law passed by the Colonial Assembly of the Colony of New York on November 25, 1710. That law gave what was referred to, depending on the source, the district, districts, or precinct of Islip the right to form a government. Royal Governor Robert Hunter wrote of the passage of this law to the authorities in London to gain approval from the Crown for the law as well as other actions in 2 letters to the Lords of Trade and Plantations. One dated November 28, 1710, and the second one dated May 7, 1711. Both letters listed the acts passed by the Colonial Assembly during its 1710 meetings that the governor had approved, and the reference to the law in the 2 letters was an act to enable the districts, in the second letter this was changed to read precincts, of Islip in the county of Suffolk to elect 2 assessors, a collector, constable, and supervisor. In the later letter, he added, "This is an act merely in favor of the Speaker of the House. I know not whether your lordships will approve my good nature in passing it after the treatment I met with." This opens a new interpretation of this document and the origins of the town, which we will look at later in this program. William Nicol was speaker, and the letters recorded that there was some friction between Governor Hunter and William Nicol, hence the remark recorded in the second letter. While the law gave the authority for Islip to form a government, they did not hold a meeting to elect any officials until 1720. Sources indicate that the eligible voters decided that there was little business to conduct, so they did not form a government for 10 years. This is very believable in that there were few people living in that area that is now the town of Islip, and many of the landowners held other properties and also spent time in New York City as part of the royal government. The condition of a document is a consideration. Often these documents are quite fragile and difficult to handle. We try never to work with the originals, instead we use photographs and work with them. In the future we hope to have a flatbed scanner, enabling us to work with high-resolution copies. Anytime an original is handled, cotton gloves and or latex gloves are worn to prevent oil from the hands to damage the documents. There are times when masks must be worn due to the dust and other issues. Paper is another factor. Ironically, many documents that are 100 or 200 years old or more are in better shape than newer documents because they were written on parchment or rag paper, both of which are low in acid content. Modern wood pulp paper can become brittle or even disintegrate over time, as they are of high acid content, and the acid attacks the wood fibers over time, causing extreme yellowing. If not treated, the document could be lost forever. This beautiful, almost calligraphic style of writing was done with a quill pen and iron gall ink. The cut of the quill had been changed early in the 17th century to allow for faster writing, and that combined with the skill of the writer created beautiful documents. These documents are a treasury of beautiful penmanship and a reminder of a skill fading away in these modern times. They are sometimes so ornate that it is hard to read the writing. Other documents display writing that is almost childlike in simplicity, as not everyone wrote a document or letter that often. The collection also holds examples of handwriting where it appears as if they were written by left-handers and forced to write with their right hand. Often it requires the transcriber to use magnification sheets and glasses along with the context to make out a word. Add to that the previously mentioned condition of the paper, fading ink, and add to that figuring out antiquated and phonetic spelling and long lost abbreviations makes transcriptions both an adventure and detective story. Another issue mentioned is created by the ink used. Before 1830, all handwritten documents written in ink used a quill pen and iron gall ink. Writing with a quill is almost like painting the writing on the page, not as we see in movies where the person is pressing down as we do today. The ink used was made from natural sources, mainly wood gall and iron oxide, and is therefore caustic. Over the years, the iron content oxidizes and causes the ink to turn brown. As the ink ages further, the ink will fade out and flake off. To stop this, the document must be sent to a conservator to stabilize the ink. After 1830, the steel pen comes into use, speed writing, but new inks had to be developed as it was found that the iron gall ink corroded the steel nibs of the pen. As the 19th century progressed, new inks that were not corrosive also helped ink documents be more permanent and therefore more easily read over a longer time. Many documents such as schoolbooks, recipe collections, and other day-to-day domestic documents were written in pencil. Over time, pencil writings fade due to wear caused by rubbing on the paper. Again, these must be conserved and carefully handled, as these give us glimpses into everyday life. Spelling and other issues also impact the understanding of a document. In colonial times, spelling was unregulated and often phonetic. Remember that people in Islip came from various sections of Europe, as well as members of the Secretog clan were in this area, and this impacted their pronunciation of English. One entry in the town records has the words "dogder" for daughter, and different for different. This also gives us a clue as to the accents found in the town. All this phonetic spelling came about not because they were illiterate, but rather that there was no accepted standard of spelling as we know it today in America until Noah Webster's spelling book was published in 1783. Regulated spelling came even later in England. Add to that the fact that in 1720, unless you had money, the education of children was often done at home, usually by their mothers. Wealthier people could hire tutors or send their children to a private boarding school. For those schooled at home, that meant the spelling, pronunciation, and inflections of the origins of the parents were the children's also. The most readily available text to teach reading was the Bible, and in 1720 and before, this was the authorized version we know as the King James Bible. It is not the same King James Version translation that is used today. The King James Bible of the early 18th century was for the most part the original translation, and even by then some of the words in it, spelling and meanings had either fallen out of use or changed primary meaning. Also, English of that time was still impacted by its Saxon roots, and we often forget that English is a Germanic language which can be found in some of the other town records, where the writer used versions of German fracture writing. In school, we are taught that English has 26 letters. While not exactly true, in earlier times there were other letters in daily use, and these are frequently found in old documents. We see one of these old letters used on signs even today. That letter now, gone from English, was a stylized Y. We see that in people trying to give their home or business an old feel by using the word ye. Contrary to popular opinion today, this word was pronounced as the at the time. The Y character was once part of the printer's alphabet and stood for the th, the sound. This document also shows uses the long S, which resembles an F without the cross mark. You can see this in the word assessors and constable. It does not use another letter now dropped from the English language, and that is a script B for the double S, which is found in other documents in our collection and was still in use in 1720. For the rest of the story, go to the First Minutes, Part 2.